Welcome to our webinar on oral communications for grades 6 through 8. We are going to dive right in and start with some introductions. My name is Brenna McCormick, and I'm the Education Associate for ELA standards for our middle level teachers and students across the state. And we have a landing page that you can use today. You can see the QR code there. It'll also serve as a note catcher. There will be places for you to jot down your thinking throughout the webinar. There'll also be some hyperlinks for you to access different articles, resources, and surveys. We always like to remind you that any resources that we provide or suggest are meant to be in alignment with your high quality instructional materials that have been adopted in your school district. So any instructional resources and supports will be shared throughout the presentation and on your note catcher. And they are just some of many examples. Curriculum is determined and selected at the local level, and instruction should be based on student interest and need. In addition to what is shared today, please be sure to consult your high quality instructional materials for resources and engagement to support students' learning. So let's get started with our purpose for today. If you're using your note catcher, your landing page, you'll notice box 1 here on the side. You can look, or excuse me, this number 1 on the side, you can look on your note catcher and align that to box 1. So we want you to understand content and rigor expectations of oral communications for middle level students in order to develop and provide standards-based instruction using high-quality instructional materials and evidence-based strategies. Now, as you can see, this purpose statement is full of educator lingo. Take a moment to really deconstruct the statement. What are the verbs? What are the nouns? And in your own words, what do you think you should be able to do when we're finished today? Now that you've established your purpose for our time together, let's start by considering this quote from Rebecca Chisholm and Leanne Thomaswick. Oral communication is more than just knowledgeable peers sharing answers. It is the use of language as a tool to construct meaning. So, in box 2, I'd like you to consider these two questions. What does this mean for reading and for writing? And how can this shape the way you approach the instruction of oral communication in your classroom? One important idea, which we will discuss throughout today's session, is that oral communication is not only an integral component of language arts instruction, but it's a major support for both reading and writing. As we move through our time today, continue to consider the impact oral communication skills can have on our students as readers, writers, and critical thinkers. So, our agenda as we get started, we're going to start with an overview of the oral communications in general. What does oral communications entail? Then we're going to look at our standard and indicator expectations. We'll then switch over to instructional practices and collaboration, and then finish with clarity and closure. All right. On your note catcher, box 3, you're going to see several options of text for you to explore. So I'd like for you to choose either one of the articles, one of the videos, or one of the websites. Take a few minutes and peruse that text. As you're reading or viewing, I want you to choose one statement that you feel is particularly impactful and then reflect on that statement. You can make a connection, ask a question, challenge something that you read, or include an aha moment. And then be sure to explain your thinking. I hope you were able to think through some rich information that was shared in those texts. After synthesizing them, I'm going to give you a couple of the aha moments that we have. So the first is that talk is the foundation of learning and literacy development. So Britton's and Barnes research highlights that both reading and writing are deeply connected to oral language. Talk serves as the foundation for literacy by enabling students to process ideas, refine their thinking, and engage in meaningful learning experiences. Without opportunities for discussion, students may struggle to fully develop their reading comprehension and writing skills. Secondly, authentic and purposeful discussion leads to deeper engagement. Rich talk is most effective when it is relevant to students' experiences, encourages inquiry, and goes beyond simply meeting curriculum expectations. It fosters engagement by being authentic and student-centered, promoting respectful dialogue, and allowing students to take ownership of their learning. When students see discussions as meaningful rather than performative or evaluative, they become more invested in critical thinking and idea development. And then finally, oral language is a crucial but underutilized component of writing instruction. Research supports the integration of oral language into writing instruction, yet it is often overlooked in favor of reading and writing due to standardized testing priorities. Strategies such as oral storytelling, structured conversations, and verbal reasoning exercises help students clarify their thinking, develop sentence fluency, and improve their writing. Student talk also aids in collaborative learning by encouraging the exchange of ideas and active engagement in the learning process. So, there certainly is a lot of value to be found in the use of oral communications in the classroom. So, as a reminder, there are four new strands within the 2024 ELA standards. We have Foundations of Literacy, Applications of Reading, Research, and then what we're focused on today are the written and oral communication strand. So within written and oral communication, there are 9 standards. Three of those specifically deal with oral communications. Our team has previously discussed the first 5 standards within this strand. We have recorded webinars for each. If you're interested in viewing those, they're linked on your landing page. But today, we're going to discuss the 3 oral communication standards for grades 6 through 8. And those are ELA C.7.1, Communicating Ideas, C.8.1, Collaboration and Perspective, and C.9.1, Evaluating Ideas. All right, so here are each of the oral communication standards. Consider your current understanding of and experience with these skills. And in box 4 of your note catcher, think about what oral communication does or should look and sound like in the middle level classroom. Now we're going to take a moment to look at our grade level entrance statements. The grade level entrance statements provide an overview of learning at each grade level, including examples of reading, research, and writing that a student might engage in. These entrance statements are meant to provide a starting point for instruction and can be used to build out long range plans, be added to a course syllabus, or even shared with parents and students. So I want you to choose one of the grade level entrance statements for grades 6 through 8. If you serve more than one grade, just pick your favorite. And as you choose, I want you to pay particular attention to the reading and writing expectations for the grade level. And then consider how the expectations for oral communications could enhance the reading or writing that is expected. Now, you can find the grade level entrance statements linked on box 5 of your note catcher. And I'll give you just a moment to take a look and think through how the expectations for oral communications could enhance the reading or writing that is expected. All right, so keep those ideas in mind as we move through the rest of the presentation, and we're going to come back to some instructional practices shortly. Now, as we were looking through our grade level entrance statements, we were able to consider a few things that from the grade level entrance statements in reading and writing that oral communications could enhance. And so we have just one example for each grade level to share with you. So oral communication skills can, in sixth grade, enhance students' ability to make inferences by fostering deeper engagement with complex ideas before they're put into writing. We know that discussing inferences aloud allows students to refine their thinking, justify their reasoning, and receive immediate feedback from peers and teachers. So, by articulating their thoughts and conversations, students strengthen their ability to later express these in writing. In seventh grade, oral communication skills can enhance seventh graders' ability to analyze an author's choice and how they impact meaning by deepening critical thinking and argumentation skills before translating their ideas into writing. So students can engage in structured discussions or debates about an author's use of ethos, pathos, and logos, allowing students to articulate their analysis, challenge each other's interpretations, and refine their reasoning before they formalize their ideas in writing. And then finally, in eighth grade, oral communication skills can enhance their ability to analyze how an author manipulates time, to create mystery and suspense by helping students articulate observations, refine interpretations, and develop stronger analytical writing. If you have students read suspenseful passages out loud and analyze that impact of the pauses that you're taking, the tone, the pacing, students can better understand how authors manipulate time. Retelling key moments in their own words helps them process how shifts in time affect tension and plot development. So there certainly are more ways than just these three to use oral communication to enhance reading and writing, but we hope that you're starting to think through how you could potentially bundle those expectations together to ensure that students are getting practice with their oral communication. So now let's take a moment to look at the profile of the South Carolina graduate and our overarching expectations for the 2024 ELA standards. So if you look at these two images on the screen, take a moment, read over them, and consider where they overlap with oral communication skills. Which oral communication skills could be considered transferable for students outside of the ELA classroom? So on box 6, you have a place to look at your overarching expectations and think through where my oral communication skills represented. Do the same thing for the profile of the South Carolina graduate. And then the third box is to consider of these skills that you're noticing, what is truly transferable for students when they walk out of the classroom door after ELA. Few of the takeaways that our team had when considering the overlap with overarching expectations include obviously having academic discussions, that argumentation and persuasion piece, collaborative learning, an adaptation to various contexts. Um, the overarching expectations really stress the integration of reading, writing, and communication skills so that we're developing well rounded literate students and oral communications plays a key role in each of these as students learn to articulate and defend their ideas using text evidence as they practice those rhetorical appeals beginning in sixth grade, which will verbally strengthen their writing skills. They engage in peer discussions that foster analytical thinking and preparing students for professional teamwork. And then having students be able to adjust their tone or style or message based on the audience, which is an essential skill for most, if not all, careers. And then taking a look at the profile of the South Carolina graduate, we know that this profile emphasizes world-class knowledge, including communication, reading, and writing, world-class skills such as critical thinking, problem-solving, collaboration, and information literacy, and then life and career characteristics, so those interpersonal skills, integrity, perseverance. So things like expressing ideas clearly and persuasively, engaging in academic discourse, debate, and discussion, listening actively, responding thoughtfully to diverse perspectives, adapting communication for different audiences and purposes, building confidence in public speaking, leadership, and collaboration. And so One thing that we want to remember is that oral communication is not just an ELA skill. It's critical in STEM, in social studies, the arts, career readiness. There are certainly many transferable skills that you can pull out of the overarching expectations, the profile of the South Carolina graduate, and our oral communications expectations. Those public speaking and presentation skills that are essential for explaining ideas in science and business and leadership. Active listening and questioning, crucial for collaboration in all subjects, from a math discussion to a history debate. You've got negotiation and persuasion helps in debates, civic engagement, workplace communication. You've got interview and professional communication. That's going to prepare students for job interviews, networking, workplace collaboration, digital communication, things like podcasts, video presentations, and virtual discussions that really mirror real world communication methods. So, our oral communication skills are essential transferable skills for our students as they move out of the K 12 academic setting. So, I want you to take a moment now and stop and jot. Based on your learning so far, how has your understanding of oral communications been challenged, changed, or confirmed? And you can jot that in box 7 of your note catcher. Now that we have completed an overview of oral communications, let's look at the specific expectations that are outlined in our standards document. We're going to use the vertical progression document to dive into the grade level expectation for written and oral communications. What you see here on the screen is a example of one of our written um, progressions of improve in writing, C.5.1. I'm going to just use this as an example to show you how the vertical progression is set up. You can see that the standard is at the top, followed by a progression that includes all of the indicator expectations for each grade level. We've got English 4 at the top, all the way down to kindergarten. The kindergarten through English 4 progression for each standard and indicator is listed for every single standard and indicator. And what you can notice is these bold words, for example, clarity of content in grade 6, represent new content and skills. So that will be the first time that students are introduced to that specific content. So I want you now to take a look at these vertical articulations for your grade level. Again, just choose either 6th, 7th, or 8th grade. Those are linked on your landing page on box 8. And we're going to use the Say Mean Matter protocol and the vertical articulation documents to explore each of those expectations for the grade level. So you choose one grade level, but then you will look at each of the 3 oral communication standards. So as you're looking, consider, what does the grade level indicator say? What content and skills are being introduced? Then think about, what does that mean for the prior knowledge that students need to be successful at the chosen grade level? So what do they need to come to your grade level with to be able to be successful? And then finally, why does this information matter to teachers? How will knowing what students need to know and what you're expected to teach inform your planning and instruction? All right, so we're going to walk through our findings for each of the 3 oral communication standards, beginning with C7. We're going to look at each grade level, and I'm going to show you the expectations that are introduced for the first time in C7 for each grade level, and hope that teachers really keep this in mind as they plan for instruction, as students may be lacking background knowledge in these areas and will be practicing these skills, learning this content for the first time. So in grade 6, that includes conveying a clear perspective, including graphics, and using appropriate digital tools for the task. Grade 7, presenting claims and findings, emphasizing key ideas with relevant descriptions, facts, details, and examples, and then conveying a clear perspective with clear reasoning and valid evidence. And then finally, grade 8 has one new expectation, and that is for a variety of task purposes and audiences. For C.8, the new expectations include demonstrating an understanding of diverse perspectives for grade 6, considering how those new ideas and diverse perspectives impact opinions about a topic, text, or issue in grade 7. And then in grade 8, qualify or justify views based on evidence. And then finally, C9, our evaluating ideas standard for grade 6. Students are expected to distinguish relevant and valid claims from irrelevant and invalid claims and determine how a speaker articulates a clear message, chooses appropriate media, and or uses appropriate voice for the audience. Grade 7, you're evaluating the relevance of evidence for the first time. And then grade 8, evaluating speakers' reasoning and addressing possible misconceptions or objections. All right, so now that you've taken a really close look at the expectations for your specific grade level, in box 9, I want you to consider the most important thing. So what's the most important thing you learned about the oral communications expectations at your grade level? All right, so we're going to now move into that third section of our time together today, and that is instructional practices and collaboration. And as we talk about instruction, it's important to remember that our instruction should align to the intent of our grade level indicators. So we always start with that grade level indicator. As a sixth grade teacher, seventh grade teacher, eighth grade teacher, what are you expected to teach? That then should really impact, influence the development of your instruction and the formative assessments that you use in your classroom. Um, the processes are iterative. We may use the formative assessment or feedback to determine which indicators need to be revisited or which instructional strategies may need to be adapted to support our learners. And so this alignment, keeping this in mind, is going to guide us through the work in this section. So we just discussed the idea that oral communications can support reading and writing. So let's apply this in the context of our standards. So take a look at the C.1 and C.7 standards. C.1 being argumentative writing, write arguments to support claims with clear reasons and evidence, and C7 being presenting ideas, organize and communicate ideas through a range of formats to engage a variety of audiences. If you look on box 10 of your note catcher, you'll see that you have the vertical articulations for each of these standards. And I want you to think through the idea of how these two standards connect to and support one another. You may notice similarities between the expectations for writing arguments and presenting ideas. And one question that we have received from teachers across the state is these two indicators have similar language or expectations. Should I just teach one? Should I combine them? And when we see connections between content and skills across indicators, it's definitely becomes an opportunity to intentionally bundle these for instruction. So as we have read and discussed, oral communications can be a way to support reading and writing. So in this section, we're going to explore resources and strategies that not only align with the indicator intent of our oral communication standards, but can be intentionally bundled with reading and writing lessons. All right, so we're going to look at instructional practices through two lenses. So the first lens of instruction is the idea of generative and evaluative experiences, and then our second lens of for instruction is through micro, mini, and macro experiences. And we'll take a minute and talk about what each one of those means. All right, so first, generative versus evaluative experiences. So students need to have exposure to both types of experiences. Our generative experiences are those that allow students to apply their learning through the creation of a product that aligns with the skills and content from prior instruction. So this would be a presentation, a class discussion, maybe an essay if you're writing, but they are generating a product. An evaluative experiences where the student serves as an expert. You're reviewing work, providing targeted feedback, providing revisions or edits. So maybe it's a video review, giving feedback to a speaker. These experiences not only align with our reading and writing standards, but they also naturally connect to specific oral communication standards. So if you think C7 has that natural alignment to generative experiences, C9, a natural alignment to our evaluative experiences, and then C8 really sits in the middle and aligns to both as students are generating responses while evaluating the ideas of others during discussion. So that's the first lens, um, opportunities for students to generate a product and evaluate the work of someone else. The second lens is what we call the micro, mini, macro experiences. And this gives students a opportunity to write for a variety of purposes at various lengths. So your micro experience is going to be something that takes students less than a class period, maybe 5 or 10 minutes even. Your mini experience is going to be 1 to 2 class periods, and then your macro are your culminating experiences, maybe at the end of a unit, or it takes multiple days or a week or so to complete the activity. So, again, these terms refer to the depth and amount of time that an experience may take. As we know, students need multiple exposures and experiences in order to truly master concepts. C7, for example, need not only be demonstrated through a formal speech, they can present ideas in micro and mini bursts as well. So this allows teachers to target specific skills through smaller experiences and provide opportunities for students to demonstrate mastery on a larger scale. Um, we have discussed micro, mini, macros experiences in a lot of our previous webinars. So we definitely have resources for you to go back and look on that if you're interested. But today we're adding on that oral communication piece using that same structure. And we have some examples to get you started. So box 11 of your note catcher, you'll see that you have some resources for oral communications for each of the 3 standards: communicating ideas, collaboration and perspective, and then evaluating ideas. In each of those folders, you'll see examples for a micro, a mini, and a macro within the middle level expectations. So you're going to have some time to explore the resources and think about what could be useful to you as is, or if they were adjusted. For example, if you open communicating ideas in 6th grade's a mini experience, but you'd like to use it for 8th grade, what adjustments would you need to make? So take a few minutes and look through those resources. You'll also notice that in the folder there is what we call the micro, mini, macro master document. And that includes all of those experiences that we have developed through the entire course of our webinar series, even back in our written communications webinars. So it's a vast repository of activities that you can use to help students demonstrate their proficiency in a certain area. So now that you've had a chance to explore resources and strategies for oral communications, we're going to practice using these resources to bundle indicators and enhance lessons. We have linked on box 12 of your note catcher an example lesson that comes from one of the high quality instructional materials curriculums that was adopted in our state. Now, remember, this is an example, not necessarily an exemplar. We're using these as an opportunity to start practicing how to use our high quality instructional materials with integrity, making sure they're aligned to grade level expectations. So you get to choose one of the documents, 6th, 7th, or 8th grade. And the first thing we want you to do is to review the provided sample lesson. Then consider what content and skills are being taught through the lesson. What's the expectation? Chances are it's not actually an oral communications lesson. It may be reading, it may be writing. Whatever it is, decide, is that lesson indicator aligned for the grade level it is meant to be for? Then I want you to choose an oral communications indicator, so either C7, C8, or C9, and integrate it into the lesson. Would it be generative? Would it be evaluative? How would it align with the skills that the lesson was intended to teach? And then think through the resources or the strategies that were included in your micro, mini, macro folders and decide which one would enhance the lesson and allow students to practice their oral communication skills. So again, we're looking at a lesson that is included in our high quality instructional materials and considering how do we integrate oral communications in this through a micro, mini, or macro experience. All right, now that you have had time to revise or update that lesson plan with an oral communication skill, let's take a moment to really wrap up our thinking for today. And on box 13, you've got your compass reflection, and we'd like for you to take a minute and consider next steps. Now that you have all these new resources and this new information about oral communications and how valuable they can be to our reading and writing process, what is your next step? What are you excited about? What are you saving for later? Like, I got it, but I can't focus on that part now, but I want to come back to it later. And what are you wondering? Do you have any additional questions that are tumbling around? All right, and then finally, we're going to go into some clarity and closure. So, again, our purpose today was to understand content and rigor expectations of oral communications for middle school students in order to develop and provide standards based instruction using high quality instructional materials and evidence based strategies. And I asked you way back at the beginning, box one of your note catcher, to kind of interpret this purpose statement in your own words. And so take a moment, consider how we met the purpose today, and did your interpretation of the purpose match our end result?